OCD is a severe and very common condition. The idea that OCD is only about hand washing and organization is a misconception. And in an attempt to make the distress from their unwanted thoughts go away, people with OCD will often engage in repetitive and physical and mental behaviors known as compulsions, which can be incredibly time-consuming and exhausting.
OCD is highly treatable, but it needs specialized treatment. NoCD is a virtual therapy provider for OCD that makes getting specialized therapy easier than ever. With NoCD, you can do live face-to-face video therapy with licensed therapists who specialize in OCD. NoCD therapists receive specialized training in exposure and response prevention, or ERP. NoCD accepts many major insurance plans and offers always-on support between sessions. If you think you might be struggling with OCD and want to learn more about therapy with NoCD, go to nocd.com and schedule a free 15-minute call with their team. That's nocd.com to learn more and book a free 15-minute call. Gretchen, you and I both love using an Airbnb when we go away, but you can also be an Airbnb host. You know, in LA, a lot of people go away for work for weeks, maybe even months. And a great thing to do is to be an Airbnb host, you know,
Yes.
while you're gone. I mean, this can be good for somebody who's often traveling, somebody who has extra space. They could do it while they're there. Somebody who has a seasonal house, Gretchen.
Right. Or somebody who always goes away for the same time of year, you know, for family traditions or like there's work events. Like you say, people are going away all the time. And if they have a home, they can Airbnb it. You know, we all have things that we need a little bit of extra money for. With Airbnb, you can make some of that side money and, you know, you can give a great experience to other people. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.com/host. Hello and welcome to More Happier, a podcast where we get more happier. It's happiness with a looser vibe. It's the weekend. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, Gretch.
This week and next week, we are doing something a little bit special. Each year, World Mental Health Day is on October 10th. This day was first celebrated in 1992. And Elizabeth, you know I love using the calendar to inspire thought and reflection. And that's exactly what this day is for.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to happiness. And so I had a terrific time getting together with Dr. Laurie Santos, Dr. Joy Harden Bradford, and Dan Harris to talk about issues related to World Mental Health Day.
And Gretchen, as part of that, let's not forget, you got to meet someone else who's special to millions of people around the world.
Yes, Elmo. Yeah.
That is so fun. Elmo was on the panel.
Elmo was on the panel. Elmo had a lot to say, many thoughts. It was so fun. I love this conversation. I'm grateful to Laurie Santos for bringing us all together.
Yes.
October 10th is World Mental Health Day. It's an annual chance to talk about our mental well-being, to take the opportunity to look at the challenges we're all facing and explore strategies that we can use to prevent things like anxiety, depression, and chronic stress. The world of podcasting is full of shows with great advice on improving well-being. So a few of us decided to get together and pool our expertise. And today's guest list is pretty impressive, so much so that I've decided to refer to today's crew as the Titans of Happiness. Dr. Joy Harden Bradford is a clinical psychologist, who you may better know as the host of the podcast Therapy for Black Girls. Gretchen Rubin is the OG of well-being experts. She's written a bunch of best-selling happiness books, most recently Life in 5 Senses. She also created a podcast called Happier with Gretchen Rubin. Titan number 3 is Dan Harris. Dan was a TV news anchor who, after having a panic attack live on air, began looking into mindfulness meditation practices. He now devotes himself to his podcast, 10% Happier, and his new listener community, which you should check out at danharris.com. And since I wanted this to be an extra special show, I invited one extra special guest. Earlier this year, he sent out a very simple message on social media, checking in on all of us. "How is everybody doing?" he asked. 220 million people saw his message, and tens of thousands of them replied, all the way from presidents to Paddington Bear. That post was made by my friend, Sesame Street's Elmo.
Hey, Elmo.
Oh, hi, Dr. Laurie. Elmo's so happy to see you again.
Aw, seeing you makes me so happy too, Elmo. Elmo, thanks for being one of our Titans of Happiness.
Titan? What's a Titan? Elmo's a monster.
Well, Titans are kind of like monsters, Elmo.
Oh, really? Well, so it's a monster of happiness? So that makes Elmo a happiness monster.
Yeah, you totally are.
Oh, are your friends happiness monsters too?
Kind of. Elmo, this is Dan.
What's up, Elmo?
Gretchen.
Hello, Elmo. I'm happy to meet you.
And Dr. Joy.
Hi, Elmo. How are you?
Doing great. Nice to meet you.
You too. It's my pleasure.
Oh, cool.
Cool. All right. So first off, thanks to all my experts who have come on and agreed to be Titans of Happiness. I'm curious if that label makes you feel uneasy, as I've sometimes felt when I've been referred to as an expert on happiness, because sometimes that feels disingenuous when I feel like I'm working just as hard on my own happiness and trying to figure this out as much as everybody. I don't know if others can relate there.
Yeah, I will definitely say that doesn't feel like a term I would give myself. But I think I am also reminded that to be helpful to other people, you only need to be like a step or two ahead. And so I don't have to be, 12,000 steps ahead to be able to have something to offer. And so I think I am getting more comfortable with the idea that I've gone to school for a very long time to share some things with my community that can be really helpful to them.
Exactly. I would say that for me, research is me search. And I'm always guided in my explorations by trying to figure out what's going to work for me. And along the way, I find, well, something works really well for some people, but not for me. Like meditation works so well for Dan. I can learn from that. So yeah, I don't think of myself as somebody who's figured it all out, but somebody who's just really interested in exploring it and thinking about it and trying to gather the ideas and make sense of all the research and thought-provoking ideas that are out in the world.
Dan, does that resonate to you, the idea of research as me search?
Totally. One of my little jokes is that, some experts teach from the mountaintop and I teach from the fetal position. I mean, I very much have plenty of issues that I struggle with. And, I think a cornerstone of my work, and I see this in all of your work, which is why I'm grateful to know all of you, is a willingness to be open about my struggles as a way to illustrate that it's okay to have your own stuff and that there are ways to work on it.
So you all are here because I like to consider this group the Titans of Happiness, right? Folks that I turn to when I'm looking for great advice on how we can all improve our mental health. And we're here on World Mental Health Day. And I think it's a salient World Mental Health Day here in 2024, because I think a lot of us are struggling when it comes to our mental health. And the goal for this conversation is to figure out some strategies that we can all use to sort of feel better. And maybe even to do a deep dive into some of the problems with mental health that I think so many of us are facing. And I think a real big one, at least when it comes to what folks like the Surgeon General talk about and so on, is loneliness, this crisis that we're all kind of in need of social connection. Dan, maybe let me start with you.
What do I think of it? I think it's a huge problem. We live in an individualistic society that's, to a certain extent, healthy, but we have perfected the art of unhealthy individualism. And it shows up over time in increasingly pernicious ways. We're living alone. And now with technology, basically everything about modern life militates against actual human-to-human social interaction. And I believe this is one of the contributing factors to the epidemic of mental health issues we're seeing: anxiety, suicide, addiction, depression, and loneliness. So what do you do about it? Well, one of the best tips I've heard comes from the Surgeon General himself, Dr. Vivek Murthy. And it's a counterintuitive piece of advice. And in part, that's why I like it so much. It is, if you are feeling lonely, to volunteer. Volunteering puts you in touch with other people, reminds you of your own self-worth. It's inherently ennobling and kind of, as I like to say, helps you pull your head out of your ass. So that to me is the piece of advice that seems to be among the most powerful.
I love that because it first helps with social connection, obviously, which we know is important for reducing loneliness, but just doing nice stuff for others is also something that we know kind of makes you feel better too. So it's kind of like a twofer if you're sort of volunteering and jumping in. Dr. Joy, in your clinical practice, does this come up? Do you have strategies that you turn to when people are feeling lonely?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to build on something that Dan mentioned, because I think the technology that we all use in some ways, I think, tricks us to believe that we are actually connecting with other people. people. And in some ways that's the case, but I think it is easy to then forget, like, oh, I haven't actually seen my best friend in like 3 months because we just keep up on WhatsApp, right? And so I think it is really important to pay attention to the amount of time we're spending on our screens. That is one thing that I talk about pretty frequently in my practice and on the podcast, is really like auditing our social media and taking account of how much time we actually are spending on our devices, because I think it is giving us the idea that we are way more connected than we actually are.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of, I joke with my students, it's like the NutraSuite of social connection, right? Like it feels like we're getting some nutritious value from the social connection, but if anything, it's like the opposite. If anything, it's often at opportunity cost of the in real life social connection, right? Gretchen, any other thoughts on kind of loneliness and social connection?
Well, just to build on what Joy and Dan said, because I completely agree. And I always remind myself that IRL is better than URL. And you've always got to like take those connections from the online version to the in real life version. And volunteering is terrific. I mean, one of the nicest things about human nature is, do good, feel good. It really works. But I think joining any group is also a really good cure for loneliness, like whether that's bird watching or it's a poker group or it's a book club or it's a volunteer group. You're meeting people at the dog walking park at the same time. Because one of the things we know is important for forming relationships is just seeing people consistently. The more we see people, the more we tend to like them. The more we see them, the more we can deepen our relationships with them. And indeed, ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists all agree that a key, maybe the key to a happy life, is strong relationships with other people. So when we're thinking about how to spend our precious time, energy, and money, building relationships through volunteering, through groups, through just a face-to-face meetup, just really, really central. And we'll be right back with more from my conversation with the Titans of Happiness.
Gretchen, I love quince.
Mm-hmm.
And as summer turns to fall, even here in LA, it's getting cooler. I love slipping into my quince cozy sweaters. In fact, I'm wearing one right now. I'm wearing one of my cashmere tees. I absolutely love all of their cashmere. They're known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from just $50. And it's not just that. All Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
Well, and how do they do that? By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the costs of the middleman, which passes the saving on to us, the consumer. Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/Gretchen for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Gretchen to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Gretchen.
We all have bad days, and sometimes bad weeks, and maybe even bad years. But the good news is we don't have to figure out life all alone. I'm comedian Chris Duffy, host of TED's How to Be a Better Human podcast. And our show is about the little ways that you can improve your life, actual practical tips that you can put into place that will make your day-to-day better. Whether it is setting boundaries at work or rethinking how you clean your house, each episode has conversations with experts who share tips on how to navigate life's ups and downs. Find How to Be a Better Human wherever you're listening to this.
And we're back with more Happier and my conversation with the Titans of Happiness.
Yeah, well, Gretchen, first of all, I love that Laurie dubbed you the Titans of Happiness. That's a great title.
No, we all thought that was so funny. I know, how I love words, and I certainly never thought of myself as a Titan.
Very fun. And I love your tip that IRL in real life is better than URL. We just talked about friends versus acquaintances on Happier, and this feels like it fits into that and how important it is to take the small steps toward connecting in all parts of life.
Yeah, let's get back to the conversation about connection and the importance of reaching out and this moment with Elmo that became bigger than we ever expected.
I think it's also important that we need to build on the relationships we do have too, right? We get so focused on let me find new friends.
Yes.
And this gets to something I know that Sesame Workshop has been thinking about a lot, is this idea of reaching out.
Yes.
Elmo, you know what checking in with people is, right?
Yeah, well, Elmo learned from his daddy that checking in means you ask how people are doing.
And you had a super big moment where you checked in on how a lot of people were doing on the social media site X.
Yeah, that's right.
What happened with that?
Well, when Elmo asked how people were doing with help from his daddy, Elmo was really glad to hear from friends all around the world. Yeah, they were telling Elmo how they were feeling. It's important to be able to tell a friend how you feel, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, it's super important to be able to check in on your friends.
Yeah. So many friends had big feelings, and Elmo was really happy that they could share them with Elmo.
And in addition to Elmo, we also have a visit from Samantha from Sesame Workshop.
Hi, Miss Samantha.
Hi, Elmo.
Samantha, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Samantha Malton. I'm the Chief Marketing and Brand Officer for Sesame Workshop, the global impact nonprofit behind Sesame Street.
And so, Samantha, I'm guessing that Elmo wasn't the only person at the workshop really shocked by the reaction that he got when he was checking in on so many people.
Yeah.
Tell me what that was like for folks at the workshop.
We could not have anticipated the reaction that we had. It was just incredible. And what it signaled to us is that there has never been a greater need for the work that we're doing. We ask open-ended questions all the time, Elmo, with help from his daddy. But this time, this really touched people. The idea of checking in on them sparked a response that was unlike any other we've ever had at Sesame Workshop. Over 300 million people saw his tweet and millions responded, from world leaders responding to everyday people who check on Elmo every day. And I really believe that it's because of the relationship that they felt towards Elmo. It's such a sense of loneliness and people feeling like they are on their own. And it is so important to be able to check in on a friend, a family member, a loved one. One of the things that Sesame is focused on now, we just launched our well-being report in partnership with the Harris Poll so that we could start to examine this issue at scale. It's just astounding what we're seeing. 1 in 3 parents feel that mental health is negatively affecting their family. And it's over half of teens. I think one of the things that I am heartened to see in some of our findings is that people are much more apt to ask for help now. These efforts towards destigmatization of mental health are really paying off, and particularly with younger generations. Gen X, millennials feel much more empowered to ask for help than previous generations.
I mean,
And I think we also need to...
sorry.
go ahead, Dan.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I got excited. There's a great expression I heard, which has really become a life motto for me, and it is never worry alone.
Yeah.
It is like life advice par excellence. This is wisdom enshrined in, sort of ancient traditions and in modern psychological research. And I love thinking about, this study at Harvard that I know all of you have heard about, the Harvard study for adult development that has looked at several generations of people in the Boston area to get a sense longitudinally, like what contributes to a long and healthy and happy and successful life. And the one thing that comes screaming out of the data most clearly is the quality of your relationships, because stress is generally what kills us, and quality relationships mitigate stress. So never worry alone. And this is true even for introverts. You may not need as much social interaction as an extrovert like me and perhaps Elmo, but you still need it.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things is even something like talking to a sales clerk or saying to a passerby, "Oh, what a cute dog," that we get a lift even from these like very minor exchanges with other people, which is another reason why being socially isolated is so bad for us. We're social creatures. We're meant to be feeling like we're part of a community. And so sometimes if you're feeling low and lonely, just walking outside and just having these little exchanges with just the people in your neighborhood.
Oh, that is a good thing to do.
Yes.
Elmo will try that.
That itself can be a small but meaningful step to take.
It's just interesting. There's so much data. I've interviewed this woman on my podcast. I suspect some of you may have already talked to her, Barbara Fredrickson, who's done all this work on micro interactions and how these, as Gretchen was describing, talking to the barista or the sales clerk or somebody in the street with a cute dog. This is not trivial stuff. It adds up to real boosts in happiness.
I was going to say, I know so much was written during the pandemic and kind of right after about how we lost so many of those micro interactions, right? Like, so I was talking to the sales clerk, and I think we're still in a pattern of like reestablishing that, which is difficult because so many people are continuing to work from home. And so I think we do have to kind of train that muscle again to kind of reconnect to those small ways we connected with other people.
But, and I think one of the sort of dangerous things about loneliness is there is a tendency when we become lonely to withdraw. You would think that when someone becomes lonely, they would become more and more excited to like engage, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes, you want to pull back. It feels more and more awkward. And as Joy was saying, kind of the whole COVID period kind of retrained us. And so it might feel more effortful to step out and have those little conversation or big conversations if you've sort of adjusted to not doing it or just connecting through social media. And so I think there's sort of a feeling that, well, if I'm lonely, of course, I'll jump at the chance to go to a party, or I'll jump at the chance to go to a neighborhood barbecue. But maybe that's not how it will feel. Maybe it will feel really hard and you think, it's just not worth it. I'll just stay at home. Like, I got plenty to do. And you lose touch with how energizing and important for just like our sense of vitality and well-being these big and small interactions are.
Yeah, Nick Epley, who we've had on our podcast before, talks about that we have to get over this sort of speed bump of social connection. That
Yes.
there's this kind of little,
It's a perfect metaphor. Yes.
like a mini friction. It's not too bad, just like a little speed bump.
But it can stop you. It can stop you.
Totally.
Just having to get put on real clothes.
It's the beauty of connecting over, like a Zoom or the kinds of things we're connecting over now is that you don't have to have real shoes on. Yeah. It's nice.
Joy and Gretchen and Dan, Emma loves talking to all of you, but it's time for Tango's walk. So Emma will be back soon. The Titans of Happiness will be right back.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families. Parents can send money to their kids and keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens build money confidence and lifelong financial literacy skills. The Greenlight app also includes a chores feature where you can set up one-time or recurring chores customized to your family's needs and reward kids with allowance for a job well done.
Yes, Gretch, I love Greenlight. I got Greenlight for Jack, and it has been a game changer for us. And I love that we can actually say what chores we want him to do, and then in doing them, he earns his allowance. Millions of parents and kids are learning about money on Greenlight. It's the easy, convenient way for parents to raise financially smart kids and families to navigate life together. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/happier. That's greenlight.com/happier to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/happier. When it comes to happiness and good habits, we've got you covered. But who do you turn to when you need smart financial decisions? If your answer is our sponsor, NerdWallet, then you're absolutely right. And if it's not, let us change your mind. Turn to the nerds at NerdWallet. Not only have they spent thousands of hours researching and reviewing over 1,300 financial products, but they have the tools you need to make smarter decisions.
I love that. Looking for a credit card? Go beyond the basic comparisons, filter for the features that matter to you, and read in-depth reviews. Ready to choose a high-yield savings account? Get access to exclusive deals and compare rates, bonuses, and more. House hunting? View today's top mortgage rates for your home sweet home. Make the nerds your go-to resource for smart financial decisions. Head to nerdwallet.com/learn more. NerdWallet. Finance smarter. NerdWallet Compare, Inc., NMLS 1617539.
Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for generations, from pioneering hybrid technology to redefining the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with Toyota's legendary lineup of reliable cars in stock at your local Toyota dealer, you can experience the legacy firsthand.
So check out the unparalleled performance of the new 2025 Camry with style, efficiency, and available tech to get you anywhere. Or test drive a capable and affordable Corolla equipped with everything you need to stay cool and connected. And both Camry and Corolla are available with all-wheel drive, giving you the control to go beyond. Quality, reliability, efficiency. That's the legacy of Toyota. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota. Let's go places. And we're back with more Happier and my conversation with the Titans of Happiness. Elmo had a viral moment.
Yes. And Gretch, were you surprised that millions of people responded to that from all over the world?
Yes. No, it is always funny to see what goes viral. And it is super fun. And these moments of connection are really important.
So let's get back to the Titans.
One of my own mental health challenges in 2024 is worrying about big global issues. The news seems especially relentless and grim these days. Many of us seem so divided over what actions to take. Sometimes it feels difficult to think about happier, nicer things closer to home. So I decided to ask my Titans of Happiness about this quandary, starting with Dr. Joy Harden Bradford.
Yeah, so I will go back to paying attention to how much time you're spending on your screen, because it is very easy to fall down a rabbit hole of like watching traumatic video after traumatic video, and you look up and it's been 4 hours and you feel awful. And so I think that it really is important to do that. I'm a huge fan of dance parties and hula hooping in the middle of my kitchen. Getting those endorphins going and physical activity is really, really good. And so, I think people joke about like, oh, go outside and touch grass. But being grounded and getting engaged in some physical activity can really help to manage some of the stress. And I think that often feels minute in comparison to all of the tragedies and the stress that's happening in the world. But those little things do add up and can provide a buffer for some of the more, difficult experiences we have.
Gretchen, any reactions to that one?
Well, absolutely. And just building on what Joy said, I think that sometimes people feel like it's kind of selfish to worry about our own happiness or our own well-being. And we think, well, in a world full of suffering and injustice, it's not appropriate for me morally to think about my own happiness. But what the research shows, and I think we all see this in our own lives, is the people who work on being happier, calmer, they are the people that are most able to think about the problems of the world and to help out when their community or their family member or their neighbor or their friend needs a hand. And so it isn't selfish to think about our own happiness, because that's what helps us to turn outward, to think about the problems of other people and the problems of the world. So, you're saying like, well, yeah, is me doing some hula hooping going to help the world? And you're like, it actually might, because that moment of hula hooping or that dance party might be what you need to kind of give yourself the emotional wherewithal to really engage with the bigger problems of the world. When we give more to ourselves, we can ask more from ourselves. But just like on the idea of like a simple hack, like the hula hooping, I'm a big fan of scheduling time to worry. If you kind of have worry that just kind of, just take over your whole calendar. If I just say like, okay, I'm going to worry about this from 3 to 3:30, and I get out my pen and paper and I'm like all day long, I'm like, I'm not going to worry about this now because I've got my time to worry. And then because often it's really, there's a lot of good that can come from worry, but then it just stays contained and it stays constructive because I'm in a mental state to deal with it. And I've got my pen and my paper so I can write a to-do list or follow up on things that I need to get done. So it's a much more constructive kind of worry than the kind of rumination or just sort of floating negative thoughts that are just kind of constantly, flitting around my mind, distracting me and draining me all day long. So maybe it's once a day, maybe it's twice a day, maybe it's once a week. But I think that as funny as it sounds, scheduling time to worry has really proved to be useful for me.
I love that it seems like you also do it with a pen and paper in your hand, right? Which might turn that worry into something more like expressive writing or journaling, right? Where you kind of go into problem solving mode as opposed to kind of ruminative loop mode where you just stay there forever.
Exactly. Where you're just going over and over and over it without, pinning it down or taking action. Absolutely.
And so, Dan, when we think about stress, are there other ways we can hack our body? Joy talked about kind of, movement and kind of dance parties and moving our body. I'm thinking of more like direct hacks to the fight or flight mechanism. Anything that you've gotten from your meditation practices of how we can do this better?
Well, just a plus one. I'm taking notes here. I love scheduling time for worry, and I am going to invest in a hula hoop. And I,
the next time we get together, we'll have a hula hoop contest.
And I also, I just totally agree with what you were saying, Gretchen, about how this is not selfish. You really do want to take care of yourself because it makes you a better citizen, a better family member, a better contributor.
Yes.
But to answer the question you asked, to me, what's been incredibly helpful to me in terms of burnout, and I'll be honest, I do tend toward burnout. I can be a workaholic. What's been incredibly helpful for me is self-compassion. I suspect all of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Kristen Neff and her colleague, Dr. Christopher Germer. They actually have a book coming out soon on self-compassion for burnout. And I'll give you a brief description of what self-compassion is, and then one little practical exercise. You can think of self-compassion really as the opposite of our habitual inner critic. Most of us talk to ourselves like a drill sergeant, and we think that's the best way to be effective. However, decades of research into self-compassion has shown that if you can change your inner dialogue to a supportive coach, that makes you more effective, better able to reach your goals and establish habits, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, as cheesy as I found this at first, it's been transformative. So here is what Dr. Kristen Neff calls a self-compassion break. And it's really 3 steps. The first thing to do is just to be mindful of what's happening right now. Like, yeah, this is a moment that sucks. Step number 1, not hard. 2, to recognize that whatever you're dealing with right now, you are not alone. There are millions of other people on planet Earth feeling burnt out or depressed or lonely or whatever it is you're dealing with right now. This is a common human condition. 3 is to direct some kindness toward yourself. And this is where, for skeptics like me and anti-sentimentalists like me, it can get a little weird. But there's a bunch of data to show that if you do 2 things simultaneously, 1, talk to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend. So for me, it's like, dude, yes, this sucks right now. And you've got support and you have a plan or whatever it is. I talk to myself the way I would talk to my son or a friend. And to supercharge that, put your hand on your heart, which, I mean, I don't do this with anybody watching. But again, there's a lot of data to show that this can activate the mammalian care system. We're very good, many of us, at taking care of our friends and family, not so good at taking care of ourselves, but you can channel that inner capacity for mentorship and direct it toward yourself. And to me, that's just incredibly good news.
I just want to underscore something that Dan mentioned in passing, which is that this is really good for people who are working on their habits. Because a lot of times when we're trying to be happier or more socially connected, we might be working on a habit that we think will help us achieve that aim. And just like Dan was saying, sometimes people think if they're really tough on themselves, if they are that drill sergeant, that will sort of energize them to do a better job with their habits if they've kind of fallen off the path. But in fact, just as Dan was saying, that people actually are more likely to re-engage and sort of like try again if they say things to themselves like, well, I learned that lesson the hard way, or I won't make that mistake again, or that wasn't my best day. You know, what did I learn from how that went wrong? And so again, that self-compassion is so important in sort of however we might be coming down hard on ourselves. It feels like it would be productive, but it really isn't.
Yeah, I also love this idea of talking to yourself like you talk to a friend, because I feel like that fights one of the criticisms I often get from my students about self-compassion, which is that they confuse it with self-indulgence, right? They think that means like you're letting yourself off the hook, even if your habits have been crappy, you're not going to kind of follow up with yourself. If you really think about how you talk to a friend, you wouldn't do that, right? If your friend was really messing up, you wouldn't be like, it's fine, like you do you. But you wouldn't scream at them like a drill sergeant either. You would get like curious. You'd be like, I care about you. What's going on? How can I help? How can we problem solve? And it's kind of bringing that like compassionate, curious problem solving, which is the thing we naturally do with our care system for friends. We just like rarely apply it to ourselves.
Yeah, and if you want to get granular about positive self-talk, there's been some research done by Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan. He wrote a book called Chatter, by the way, that's very good. And he has shown that if you use your own name when you're talking to yourself, it actually provides some distance that is helpful. So Gretchen, X and Y, reassuring notions. If you just put Gretchen before the reassuring notions, it can help. I often say dude or bro because I'm, like ridiculous.
Yeah, 2 points in here that I really want to emphasize from this conversation is, first, it's not selfish to worry about our own happiness and well-being, because it really does allow us to take better care of others. And that also we want to talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a friend or a child, and show compassion for ourselves just the way we would show compassion for others.
Absolutely.
Thanks again to Dr. Laurie Santos for bringing us together for this conversation. I'm excited to share part 2 next week. The best time to start a happiness project is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Elizabeth, when we were little, I remember being very annoyed because anytime I wanted to watch something that was on TV that conflicted with Sesame Street and you wanted to watch Sesame Street, Mom said you got to watch Sesame Street because Sesame Street was educational. So I felt like that was quite unjust.
Oh, that's funny. Well,
But
who doesn't love Sesame
who
Street?
doesn't? But now that's what we say. Yes. Who doesn't love Sesame Street? From the Onward Project.